Welcome back, and of course this is Straight Talk Africa coming to you live from Washington. Let me come to you immediately, Maria. You saw in the package Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni being sworn in, talking about the ICC in manners some in fact have judged it to be perhaps undiplomatic, and Western ambassadors marched out. Your reaction?
Well, I think it's an impressive move. It was more than just the United States. It was the EU. It was many Scandinavian countries. It was Canada. So first of all, many of the countries that walked out are parties to the Rome Statute and have made that commitment to fight for accountability for mass atrocities. The U.S. is not a party to the Rome Statute. We at Human Rights Watch clearly believe that they should ratify that, but they have an Office of War Crimes Prosecution, and the U.S. has worked quite a bit on pushing for ICC prosecution. So, I can see the value in the U.S. and other countries taking the stance that President Museveni appeared to mock victims of mass atrocities by calling the ICC useless people and felt that they couldn't stomach the event.
So you think the march out was symbolically significant?
I think particularly for the countries who are party to the Rome Statute, they saw that as living up to their obligations. And I think for the United States, we can argue about whether or not the U.S. has moral authority. Clearly, Human Rights Watch believes the U.S. should be doing a great deal more, including prosecuting many Americans for crimes against humanity and war crimes for certain events from our past. But that being said, I think it's important to stand up with victims of mass atrocities and say that we believe there should be accountability, that President Bashir should go to The Hague, have a fair trial, be able to fight that case, and see what happens in a fair trial there.
You mentioned, of course, how the U.S. Senate has never ratified the Rome Statute. But what about the fact that during the George W. Bush administration, they went ahead and came up with this Article 98, which allows them to get into bilateral agreements with countries not to arrest an American citizen if that citizen should have committed, for example, crimes against humanity and that kind of stuff. And guess what? The first few countries, in fact, to have signed on that treaty were Rwanda, Uganda, and Ethiopia.
Yeah, it's a problem. There's no doubt about it. I mean, at Human Rights Watch, we talk a great deal about accountability. We spend a great deal of time and resources talking to victims of serious crimes. And we believe firmly that crimes should be prosecuted. Now, it's important to flag that the ICC is a court of last resort. So it's a place where crimes and cases end up when countries are unwilling or unable to prosecute. It's not the first place to go. So clearly in the case, for example, of Bashir, the argument goes there that Sudan is clearly not willing or able to prosecute him, and that has been the push. President Museveni was a supporter of the ICC. He was the first president ever to refer a case there. And clearly we saw that indictments were issued against members of the Lord's Resistance Army. There's a case pending right now against one of the commanders of the Lord's Resistance Army. So we have seen leaders from East Africa want and push for accountability when it suits them. The challenge is that you can't just pick and choose when you like accountability. Either you believe in it or you don't. And sometimes that means you're going to have to push for cases that may not be politically expedient for you or your administration.
It's very interesting because when you mentioned President Yoweri Museveni, he obviously happens to be one of the founding signatories of the Rome Statute. Nobody put an AK-47, frankly, on his head. He did it voluntarily, but perhaps he did it because it could take care of some of his political adversaries or people that he basically didn't want to do business with. There is a time when he said, for example, that if Sudanese president Omar Bashir overflew in the Ugandan airspace, he would apprehend him and send him to The Hague. So what happened? Now he, in fact, invites him to the big party.
Yeah, I don't think I could start to even speak to what President Museveni may have been thinking in recent times. He's obviously spoken a great deal about accountability. He frequently argues that he holds his soldiers to account, but I think it's clear that the inauguration flies in the face of a great deal of what he's said in the past. So it's a travesty for victims of the Lord's Resistance Army War, for the situation in Darfur, to think that those victims may not get a day in court because this president has chosen to not send President Bashir to face the case against him, I think it's a tragedy. And I think President Museveni should have ensured that President Bashir could face his day in court.
Interesting. Sylvester, there are 9, I think, cases, in fact, at The Hague as we talk. And 6 of these were referred to The Hague by African governments themselves and 2 by the Security Council. Is there perhaps, should there be a different standard for ordinary Africans when it comes to the ICC and a different standard for presidents in Africa when it comes to the ICC when, in fact, they commit crimes against their own people?
First, there is no, no one is above the law. But I want to refer to the first question to my colleague here, Museveni and the ambassadors walking off. First of all, it's disrespect on Africa, because if African ambassadors has walked off, then that will amount to announcing of an embargo on African countries. So, and we need to start facing reality and accountability. Most of the atrocities committed in Africa and those committing it have their counterparts outside. For instance, Paul Manafort, who is now Donald Trump's campaign manager, he was representing most of the dictators that has really destroyed Africa, including my Nigerian former president, Sani Abacha. Go and Google it. Paul Manafort was the one lobbying and representing them. Just like the existing human rights abuse and corruption going on in Africa today, they have their colleagues, their networks, their allies that are promoting and advocating for them. So this is where the diasporans, the ethnic Africans, are needed seriously to be able to govern their people or also make decisions on policies that affect Africa. We are not at the table. And because of money, this is politics and interest. Most of these countries and nations go there because of what they have in common. So, but when we have someone like you, someone like me, or millions of Africans who are here being at the table making decisions and policies, we should be able to say this is what we want. That's why I love President Uhuru's comment, although it was on a different context. But when he said that you cannot give to the people what they themselves do not want. So it is time for us to start, if we really want transformation in Africa, growth in Africa, to start using the diasporans. We know America, we know there, so we stand in a better chance to get the change over there. Coming on who gets to be reprimanded or not, nobody's above the law. Recently, I used Nigeria as an example. Someone posted that if President Buhari arrests President Goodluck Jonathan, there will be anarchy. We say what? Why wouldn't he arrest him if he was there sitting down and all the monies are going out and today everybody is crying? They didn't know that the country is going to be empty. They didn't know that fathers will be suffering, mothers will be suffering, children will be suffering. So when those things were happening, who are we supposed to hold accountable? Let him come and answer the question. Likewise, any country in Africa, anybody in Africa, any corporation in Africa, no matter how million you have, whatever you have, if you commit such crime and you're found wanted, they need to arrest the person, let them face the music.